She died smiling. Those 3 words stopped the entire studio. Steve Harvey, the man who had handled thousands of episodes, tens of thousands of families, countless tears and triumphs, suddenly couldn't move. His microphone hand dropped to his side. His signature smile vanished. The audience, which moments ago had been laughing at one of his trademark jokes, fell into absolute silence. The production crew behind the cameras froze. Even the opposing family, standing at their podium ready to play, stopped breathing. Because in that moment, Family Feud wasn't a game show anymore. It was a witness to something nobody had prepared for. The boy who said it, 12-year-old Marcus Williams, stood at the contestant podium with his father's hand on his shoulder, his grandmother beside him, and his 2 uncles completing the family lineup. But there was an absence on that stage more powerful than any presence. An empty space where someone should have been standing. And Steve Harvey, who prided himself on keeping the show moving no matter what, who could crack a joke in any situation, who had seen it all, suddenly found himself in uncharted territory. But what happened in the next 17 minutes would become the most talked about moment in game show history. And it started with a question nobody saw coming. 3 hours earlier, the Williams family had arrived at the Family Feud studio in their Sunday best. Marcus wore the tie his mother had bought him for his 6th grade graduation. His father, Robert, 41 years old, straightened that tie in the green room mirror for the 3rd time. Grandmother Helen, 72 and fierce, sat with her purse on her lap. The 2 uncles, Raymond and Deshaun, kept trying to lighten the mood with jokes that fell just a little flat. A production assistant came through with her clipboard. "All right, Williams family, you're up in 20 minutes. Everyone feeling good?" "We're ready," Robert said, his voice steady in a way that took effort. The assistant started to leave, then paused. She'd done this job for 4 years and learned to read the room. "Everything okay?" Grandmother Helen looked up. "We're here for someone who couldn't be." Marcus, who'd been quiet this whole time, spoke up. "My mom passed away 4 months ago. She always wanted us to be on this show." The green room got very still. "I'm so sorry. Does Steve know?" "We mentioned it in the pre-interview," Robert said. "But we're not here for sympathy. We're here to play. That's what Angela would want." What none of them knew was that Steve Harvey had read every word of that pre-interview. That he'd sat in his dressing room that morning, staring at the note his producer had left. "Williams family, round 3. Lost mother/wife to cancer 4 months ago. 12-year-old son. They specifically requested no special treatment." Steve had been in television for 30 years. He'd seen grief. He'd helped people through it. But something about that note, about a family choosing to honor someone by showing up and playing a game, had hit him differently. He'd folded that note and put it in his jacket pocket. "Let me know when they're up," he'd told his producer. "And I want to meet them before we tape." That meeting had lasted 3 minutes. Steve had shaken everyone's hand, lingered an extra moment with Marcus. Robert had responded, "We're not brave. We're just here." And Steve had recognized that truth, the kind that comes after everyone goes back to their lives and you're left with the impossible task of continuing. But standing on that stage now, with the lights blazing and the audience energized and the cameras rolling, Steve Harvey was about to discover that some promises are harder to keep than others. The first 2 rounds went exactly as they always did. Steve worked the crowd, made his faces, acted shocked at the ridiculous answers. The Williams family was holding their own, tied with the opposing Martinez family going into fast money. During a commercial break, Steve walked over to the Williams family podium. "You guys doing okay?" "We're good," Marcus said. And then, with the unfiltered honesty of a 12-year-old, "This is exactly what Mom said it would be like. She used to watch you all the time." Steve smiled. "Yeah? What did she like about the show?" "She said you could make anybody laugh, even when they didn't want to." The stage manager called out, "Back in 30 seconds." Steve Harvey, who always knew what to say, found himself without words. He just put his hand on Marcus's shoulder for a moment, then walked back to his mark. Subscribe and leave a comment. because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. Fast Money started normally. Robert went first, answering 5 questions in rapid-fire format. He scored 187 points. Respectable, but not quite enough to win. Marcus needed 13 points. Easy. All right, Marcus, my man, Steve said, his energy deliberately high. Your pops did pretty good, got us 187. You need 13 points. You ready? Yes, sir. Here we go. Name a reason someone might smile. Marcus didn't hesitate. When they're with people they love. Ding. Number 1 answer. 32 points. There you go. Name something cold. Ice. Ding. 18 points. They were already over 13. The family had won. But Steve kept going. Name a reason you'd call in sick to work when you're not really sick. To spend time with family. Ding. 24 points. The audience was getting louder with each correct answer. Name something people save for a special occasion. Money. Ding. 31 points. 1 question left. They'd already won. Steve was smiling. Last question, Marcus. Name something you'd never forget. And that's when time stopped. Marcus looked at Steve, then at his father, then at his grandmother. His voice didn't waver. It was steady and sure and carried more weight than any 12-year-old should have to carry. The last time I saw my mom. The audience's cheering began to fade. Steve's smile didn't disappear immediately. He was still in show mode. The last time you saw your mom? Yes, sir. 3 days before she died. She was in the hospital bed. And I told her we were going to get on Family Feud because that was her dream. And she smiled so big. The nurse said later that was the last time she really smiled like that. Steve Harvey stopped moving. The audience was completely silent. She died 3 days later. Marcus continued, his voice still steady. But she died smiling. The hospice nurse told us that. She said Mom passed in her sleep and there was a smile on her face. The cameras caught it all. Steve Harvey's hands slowly lowering. His eyes filling. His mouth opening like he was about to say something, then closing again because there was nothing to say. Behind the scenes, the director made a decision that defied every producer's expectation. He didn't call cut. He let it roll. Marcus wasn't finished. My dad said we should still come to the show because that's what Mom would want. She always said Family Feud was about families being together and having fun even when things are hard. And she was right. Being here, even though she's not here, it feels like she's here. Steve Harvey had hosted Family Feud for over a decade. He'd done thousands of shows. But in this moment, Steve Harvey the host disappeared. What remained was Steve Harvey the father, the husband, the human being who understood that some moments aren't about entertainment. He walked away from his mark. The stage manager tensed, ready to call cut. But Steve's producer, watching from the control room, made a hand signal, let him go. Steve walked directly to Marcus. He didn't say anything at first. He just pulled the boy into a hug, right there on national television, with the cameras rolling and the audience watching and the lights blazing. The hug lasted 7 seconds. 7 seconds of absolute silence in a studio that held 300 people. When Steve pulled back, his eyes were red. Marcus was crying now too. Your mama's proud of you, Steve said, his voice thick. You know that, right? Marcus nodded. Steve turned to Robert. And you, sir? You're raising a strong young man. Angela did good. Robert's voice broke. She did everything good. This is the moment no one in the studio, and no one watching at home, ever saw coming. Steve Harvey looked at the cameras, directly at America, breaking every rule of television hosting. We're going to take a minute here, he said. Because some things are more important than a game show. He turned to his producer. Get me a chair. A stagehand rushed out with Steve's chair from his dressing room. Steve positioned it at the Williams family podium. He sat down. He was done hosting. He was just present. Tell me about your mom, Steve said to Marcus. And for the next 9 minutes Marcus did. He talked about how she made pancakes every Saturday shaped like whatever he wanted. How she knew all the words to every song on the radio. How she'd go to every single one of his basketball games even when she was sick, wrapped in blankets, cheering the loudest. Grandmother Helen joined in. Talked about raising Angela, about watching her become a mother, about the phone call she got when Angela was diagnosed. Robert spoke about the woman he'd loved since high school. About the last conversation they'd had, when Angela made him promise that he wouldn't stop living. The opposing family, the Martinez family, left their podium and walked over. They stood with the Williams family. Just stood there, present, witnesses to something bigger than competition. The audience wasn't an audience anymore. They were a congregation. Dozens of people crying openly. Some standing. Some with hands over hearts. Steve reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a blue card, the kind the show gave to winners. He wrote something on it. Handed it to Marcus. "This is my personal number," Steve said. "Not my agent, not my manager. Me. You call that number if you ever need anything. I don't care what it is. You call." Marcus looked at the card like it was precious. "Thank you." Steve stood up. He looked at the Williams family, then at the Martinez family, then at the audience. "We're going to give both families the prize money today," he announced. "Because some things are bigger than winning and losing." The audience exploded. Standing ovation. The Williams family was crying. The Martinez family was crying. The crew was crying. Steve Harvey walked back to his mark. He wiped his eyes. He looked at the camera. "Family Feud is a game show," he said. "But family isn't a game. Love isn't a game. Loss isn't a game. And sometimes, right in the middle of all the lights and the noise and the entertainment, we get reminded what actually matters." He turned to the Williams family. "Angela was here today. I promise you that. She was here." Marcus nodded. He was holding his grandmother's hand and his father's hand, and he was smiling. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. The episode aired 2 weeks later. The network had considered editing it down, but Steve Harvey himself called the executives. "You air it all," he said. "Or you don't air it at all." They aired it all. Within 24 hours, the clip had been viewed 40 million times. News outlets picked it up. Social media exploded. But the responses weren't about Steve Harvey being a hero. They were about recognition. Thousands of people sharing their own stories of loss, of showing up when it hurt, of finding joy in grief. Marcus and his family received letters. Hundreds of them. From people who'd lost mothers, fathers, children, spouses. From people who understood that Angela Williams was every person who'd ever loved someone enough to want them to keep living even after they were gone. Steve Harvey framed that blue card he'd given Marcus, made a copy, and kept it in his dressing room. He'd go on to host hundreds more episodes. But he'd never forget the day a 12-year-old boy taught him that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop the show. 6 months later, on what would have been Angela's 43rd birthday, Steve received a text from an unknown number. It was a photo. Marcus in a basketball uniform, holding a trophy, smiling. The text read, "We won the championship. Mom would have been proud. Thank you for reminding us she's still here." Steve saved that photo. Because that's what the moment had been about. Not about a viral clip. But about a family choosing to honor love by continuing to live. About a mother who, even in her absence, taught her son that joy and grief can exist in the same moment. And about a day when a game show became something more. When entertainment became ministry. When a host became a witness. When 3 words, "She died smiling," reminded everyone watching that the most important wins in life have nothing to do with points on a board. The blue card Marcus received that day stayed in his wallet through high school, through college, through his wedding day. He never called it. He didn't need to. Because the gift wasn't the access. The gift was the reminder that in a world obsessed with moving on to the next thing, someone had stopped. Someone had seen them. Someone had said, "This matters. You matter. Your mother mattered." And that, more than any prize money, more than any viral moment, was what Angela Williams had wanted all along. For her family to be seen. For her son to know that love doesn't end when life does. For joy to be possible even in the shadow of profound loss. Steve Harvey didn't make it happen. Marcus did. Robert did. Grandmother Helen did. The Martinez family did. They all chose, in that moment, to honor something bigger than a game. She died smiling. 3 words that stopped a show. And started a legacy.